Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. It's Friday, and it's time for another Small Grains for Brewing and Distilling Happy Hour. I'm your host, Ryan Hamilton, and I've been doing yard work all day, so I'm really looking forward to this one. Today, we'll be hearing from Mr. Vincent Coonce, who will be presenting tailoring farming, malting, and brewing techniques to locally produced grains and other raw materials. The title slide, I wrote the title and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I am very excited to hear from Vince and all the interesting things he's been doing with locally sourced ingredients from the Great Lakes region. So without further ado, take it away, Vince.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for showing up. Let's get going and see how this goes, because I have no idea how it's going to go.
It's going to go great.
There we go. That's better. I just wanted to kind of introduce myself, because I really don't know who's going to show up to this meeting. On the right, I put a bunch of icons with, that show a lot of the products that I've been associated with over the last 30 plus years. I was a home brewer, and every brewer, almost every brewer's story starts with homebrew. So I've been homebrewing since 1982. The story is that my wife was working in the Department of Food Science while I was getting a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. And we had a new professor, food science professor from MIT, who my wife invited over to dinner, and I was feeding him my homebrew, and he told me that I could actually get a graduate degree in brewing, which I had never heard of before. I had been reading everything I could about brewing, and there wasn't a whole lot out there. And this was actually right at the beginning of the craft brewing. There wasn't a whole lot of craft beer out there. The one I remember drinking is Grant Scottish Ale, was the one that really changed my life. I think that was the first one. That was out of Yakima, Washington. Anyway, I ended up going to graduate school for a special degree in brewing, basically. And what it was is a dual MS degree, chemical engineering and food science. It's supposed to be a MS and then a PhD, but I got antsy and wanted to go to work before I got the PhD. And I actually had to come back and defend my thesis a year after I left for work. But anyway, I got hired right out of graduate school by Laddish Malting. They were, at the time, owned the biggest malt house in the world, which was in North Dakota. We made an awful lot of 6-row malt. 6-row back in the day was the standard. That's what everybody was using. North Dakota was the champion. They were 6-row producers. They probably, I don't know, they probably produced 70, 80% of the barley in the United States at the time. At that time, I was hired as the quality control director for Laddish Malting. 6 months later, Cargill came in and changed ownership, and so I became part of Cargill, who all of a sudden was international. My job there, though, was not just quality control. It was kind of a new deal where they wanted quality control to also be involved in production. So I became assistant maltster, the assistant plant operations manager, as well as corporate quality control. What that meant is that I had to work production every day, and I had to come in and work weekends and take over for different people when they were on vacation, that kind of thing. So that's how I got my introduction into malting. There was also a huge pilot plant. I spent hours and hours and hours in the pilot plant making all sorts of crazy things out of all sorts of crazy raw materials. So what a lot of maltsters have to do by trial and error on a production, I got to do like over and over and over and over and over again on a very small scale. So I've been pilot malting for 30 years now, I guess. I sold to all the big brewers in the United States. 3 years after I started, I got moved to Europe, to Belgium. So I started selling. In Belgium, we had an international plant where we were loading big barges to all the international breweries. That'd be Asahi, Sapporo, SAB, Heineken, Guinness, all over the world. But we also got to sell to the local Belgian brewers, which I was a real beerhead. So I got to sell malt to Duvel. I made malt that made Duvel. I made malt that made Delirium Tremens. and on and on and on. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So Belgium was a really cool place to live. If you're into beer, there was over 5,000 different beers there, and I didn't even come close to trying them all. After Cargill, I was there for like a long time, 11 years. After that, I went to Great Western as a plant manager. There I turned into more of a craft maltster. We were selling mostly to the bigger craft brewers then in Portland, Oregon, also in California, and also up in the Seattle area, Seattle, Washington. And also we were a big Anheuser-Busch supplier. So we made a lot of specialty malts there. We had roasters, and I continued my maltster assistant work while I was plant manager. So I still maintained malting through the day and through the week, and filled in on the weekends for the maltster. So that's how I kept involved in all of that. I then went to MillerCoors as a unit manager, the brewing unit manager. So I started out on the hot side, managing the entire hot side. I had about 50 people under me. That place was a screaming plant. We made 88,000 kegs of beer a day, 44 brews, 30 plus different single brews that later on got blended together to make another 80. And those all got packaged into almost 1,000 different SKUs. That's probably the hardest job I ever had. That was like a full-time, you don't go home. I had to go home and turn on the computer so I could push buttons to make the factory work. So there was really no time to myself. Briess came looking for me when Dave Kuski decided to go to Great Western. So it was kind of cool because Dave and I ended up swapping jobs, because I was already at Great Western at one time and then Dave went there. So I went to Briess to take over for Dave Kuski, and also at the same time their maltster had left, so I became Dave Kuski and the maltster and the plant manager at Chilton all at the same time. There I did a lot of art research and development work, and so I developed a couple of different products. The one I'm most proud of is the Synergy Select, because that required me to grow barley that I had seen that looked like craft style barley in Canada. I got to grow that in Wyoming, and it produced some pretty incredible Pilsen malt. So was a really good project for me. I left Briess into semi-retirement, also starting a consulting business, and then working with Michael Cooper to build a malting facility in Michigan. So that's what I'm doing here right now. All of this work that I'm going to share, all these numbers I'm going to show you, is really a result of me trying to figure out how to get a supply chain going in Michigan for really is pretty much nothing. So we'll go past that. I had done a lot of work on flavor. So, you heard a couple weeks ago, one of the presenters was talking about what Steffi is like supposedly the best flavored lager, and what was the Golden Promise is the best, whatever. I went and actually didn't just check out those varieties. We actually grew them all, and we grew them in a very good spot. And quite frankly, some of these old flavored varieties like Boho and Barca and Malts and Loudest, they all grew quite well in Montana. That work was actually with New Glarus, with Dan Carey. He had gone to Germany and picked up he had gone to Germany and interviewed Ludwig Narcisse, who's like 99 or 100 years old, and he wanted to know what the most flavorful varieties were in Dr. Narcisse's past. And so he got these names, and he got some seed, and he gave me the seed, and then I got them growing in Montana. Also worked with Ackerman, Steffi growing Sangria, Lenora. We also grew a whole lot of winter barley all over the place in Wisconsin, which never worked, and it doesn't work in Wyoming either, because it's too cold and the snow doesn't stick on the ground there. The wind blows in the wintertime and the snow doesn't stick on the ground. So I've been trying to get flavorful varieties going for a long time. The one that I actually got going was a complete failure, and that one was called Full Pint. That's a variety that was developed, well, not developed, but discovered or rediscovered by Pat Hayes at Oregon State. And there was a group of brewers in California who all got together and tasted a sample of this, and they decided that was the best malt they ever tasted in their life. And so we were going to supply that, and we did. We grew it. We grew it in Wyoming, and it made terrible malt. It was very similar, to what I saw from some of the older Michigan varieties. It made really awful malt, and we had a bunch of it, and nobody wanted it. They weren't even interested in it. So we had gone and produced a bunch of high flavored malt that nobody wanted, and thank God it ended up having the GN glycosidic nitrile free. It was glycosidic nitrile free, so we could actually sell it to a distiller as distiller's malt, and that's where it went. That's where it ended up. So the high flavored malt ended up as distiller's malt because it was GN free. So that's my unfortunate experience with how to make flavored malt available to the world. I wanted to fix this. Hey, Ryan, it was really awesome title. Thank you so much. And I got so excited that I forgot that I'm a maltster in this thing now. I'm not a brewer right now. I'm a maltster, and maltsters don't tell brewers what practices to use. That's BS. All right, so I have to cross that brewing practice thing out of there. I don't tell a brewer what practices to follow. My job is to offer a brewer variety and consistency. All right, so that's what I'm going for, is a variety of malt that a brewer can use to make any style of beer in any equipment that he has, using any philosophy that he has. It's my job to supply him that raw material to make that beer. And I'm really talking about tailoring some farming and malting practices in order to do that in a brand new supply chain, which is the Michigan supply chain. And then, so for sustainability then, which means I want to be able to supply the same qualities, whatever those qualities are, I need to be able to supply those all the time, year after year, regardless of what happens with the supply chain. All right, so we have to build the supply chain to support all of that. There's going to be all sorts of problems, but with planning, those can all be circumvented. So yeah, I already said that. I wanted to brew a product for all beer styles, brewing process, and philosophies. In all cases, if I can, I want to go to world-class quality goals. I've got an idea from all the different malt analysis I've seen, and I've seen lots of malt analysis. I've got an idea in my head of what world-class quality is, and that's what I would like to produce if I can with locally sourced grain. And again, the bottom line is whatever quality I get, it's got to be consistent, repeatable, and reproducible. So that's the total key. A brewer can make beer out of anything. Seriously, a brewer can make beer out of friggin' anything. If there's carbohydrate, a brewer can make beer out of it. All right, period. So there are no musts for a supply to a brewer. There are no necessary things that you have to give a brewer. There is nothing that is in stone. But in the end, the brewer is going to have to repeat a good recipe that his customers are demanding year after year, and he's going to need quality, consistent, repeatable raw materials in order to do that. And that's our job as suppliers to those brewers to provide that. So in Michigan, I just wanted to show, if I was just looking at Michigan straight, period, nothing else, just Michigan, we're estimating the total annual beer production at about 1.4 million barrels. That turns into about 50,000 tons of grain demand, which is about 30,000 acres. And that's for 100% of Michigan's brewing. Okay. We're not going to get 100% of Michigan's brewing, but we can certainly make that a goal. All right. And that's where I'm at. I need a goal. That's my goal. So I would like to someday be able to supply 30,000 acres of grain to the Michigan beer, the Michigan beer production. Right now, I don't really know what the Michigan's malt production is right now, but I think Ryan said it was somewhere around 200 tons. So right now we're not even scratching 1% of the entire demand for grain to brewers in Michigan. So we have a long way to go, and I think the only way to get there is to make a really systematic approach, and that's what I'm trying to do. Oh, to help decide then how much of the different varieties we want, I'm showing you what I come up with for the national average craft beer recipe. So if you were kind of a crazy person and you went and looked up statistics for craft beer production volumes by style, and then looked up a whole bunch of recipes for beers by style, then you cross-reference those two together, and then you average everything, mathematically by weights, and then took an overall weighted average of malt use, you might come up with numbers just like this. These are the numbers I came up with when I did all that work. Oh, by the way, Statistica says that the biggest craft beer in the United States is Blue Moon. And guess who? I made Blue Moon. So I was one of the biggest craft brewers in the United States. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. So how malt quality is assessed? So a lot of brewers are gonna pick malt up out of the bag and look at it, and that is their assessment beyond what goes in to their brew house, beyond their brew house performance. All right. So I need to make those people happy. So to do that, I want that barley to be plump, and I need it to be clean. But plumpness is actually a varietal characteristic. So I can actually pick varieties based on plumpness. Okay. The analytical importance in malt use. This is a shot there from Joe Hertrick presentation back in 2013, where he was trying to convince everybody that we needed to turn all of our malt into pale ale malt to make it taste better, and he's absolutely right. But you were not making domestic lagers out of pale ale malt. Anyway, the other thing he was trying to show was that American malts have advanced way differently than Europeans, and there is a huge difference in malt analysis because of that. And most of that difference is coming from the fact that the Europeans use much less adjunct than the Americans do, or the North Americans do. And so we need a whole lot more enzymes for North American malt in order to degrade we're used to do that. We don't even need that anymore because now carbohydrates are coming in syrups and they're not even degraded in the mash mixer very much anymore. So even that's old fashioned. Same thing with fan. We don't need a whole lot of fan because the fan that we're getting out of domestic malts right now is designed for 50%, 60% adjunct use. So it's being diluted out very, very much by the adjunct. If we're making an all malt beer, I guarantee you we've got too much fan for that, and there's going to be fan left over in the finished beer, and all that does is lead to flavor instability and other types of instability. If we're not worried about instability, that's fine. Again, it's all about what the brewer wants and all that. I want to be able to offer, though, lower enzymes, lower fan to those brewers that want to utilize that. And then Brewhouse Performance, I've just named a couple of these. All the brewers are going to judge your product, the malt product, on how it performs in the brew house. When I was a brewer, the biggest thing that I was worried about was attenuation. And there's a lot of variability with attenuation because the enzyme levels aren't. Not only are the enzyme levels not all that consistent, but there are isoenzymes with different heat stabilities that are varietally dependent. So different varieties with the same level of enzyme are going to have different performance in the mash mixer just because of the fact that their heat stability is different. So some will survive heat better than others, and while they're surviving heat, then they're doing more of their enzymatic job and producing whatever it is that they're working to produce. So I had a job where I was getting my job was to collect samples from all over the world and analyze them, and then try to match them with local ingredients. So I've seen a lot of analysis of a lot of these different products. I put these up here because some of these are what I consider to be world-class in quality. They're also ones that I see in the United States brewers paying a lot of money for. Okay, and I only put Briess up there. Sorry, I only put Briess up there because of the Synergy Select pills. So I think Briess is definitely up there in the world-class quality supplier in base malts. Simpson's is pretty much the supplier of probably the highest quality oat malt there is in the world, and I would like to be able to reproduce that with some decent oats. Weyermann, I think Weyermann is, like, for me, they're the company that I would like to model myself after, because they go out and they're looking at pure varieties. They're looking at varieties that have been demonstrated to be the best quality over the years for brewing, and then they offer a whole range of products on top of that. So they not only offer pure variety base malts, but they offer like every other kind of roasted and caramelized and all sorts of products with flavors and colors. They're all over the place. They've got it all. Best malts. So when I was in Europe, it was kind of a joke that Germany had terrible barley, and I always thought it was pretty funny when I came back to the United States that some brewers just swear by German barley, and that's just the way it is. One person's trash is another person's gold, type of thing. So. Oh, my interconnection. Hang on. I'm stable. All right. This is just showing some malt analysis from some of those maltsters I was showing you before. Just on the Pilsner malt. So Bohemian Pilsner is barley. It's coming from Czechoslovakia. German Pilsner, of course, is coming from Germany. You can see on the, I think you can see if you take a look at the extract on the German Pilsner that it's definitely not up there with the Bohemian or the Briess. So I think that kind of, yeah, it's definitely a different animal. But anyway, that kind of, I kind of saw that because of my, my past bias towards German barley. Okay. Anyway, in the end, world class. To me, the common qualities in world class amongst all the different malt styles, all the different malt types from all the different sources, is that they have the highest plump and the highest extract and the lowest beta glucan. That was my take after all the stuff I looked at. All right, so that's where I'm going to run with that. We had somebody here talking about Terroir a couple weeks back, which is another very good discussion. I just wanted to show my take on that. Visually, if you look at really sound barley that was grown in North Dakota and you compare that to really sound barley in Wyoming, visually you can see the difference, period. It's way, way different. If you were to analyze these for microbial counts, you would also see a big monstrous difference, with the Wyoming barley being much cleaner than the North Dakota barley. And when I was in Europe, we actually did a lot of work on microflora and malting. And please do not ever underestimate the effect of the microflora in your malting process and in your final malt quality. So the other thing I wanted to say is North Dakota's barley looks like that because of the weather, because it's wet, because it rains right around harvest time, and that's where you get the stain from. I'm showing you some climate data for around Bismarck versus Powell, and if you can see, you got to look on the right hand side that shows you the rainfall. The scales are different on the two. if you look at the bars right now, you can see that the precipitation looks similar. But if you look at the scales, you can see that there's very little rain in Wyoming, and there's a lot of rain in North Dakota. So not only that, the temperature gets really cold down in both. But the point is that I know that the barley that we grow in North Dakota is not going to perform well in Wyoming, and vice versa. The barley that we're growing in Wyoming isn't going to perform well in North Dakota, period. So there's the effect of terroir, is that some barley varieties grow really good in an area, and some barley varieties grow really poorly in an area. And so I feel like it is our responsibility to find the best growing varieties. If we want sustainability, we got to find the varieties that grow the best in the area of interest. And that's where we got all this fabulous barley agronomic and barley quality data. I got to say the MSU work is the best I've seen. Seriously, it really lines out varieties that work and varieties that won't, and it demonstrates a lot of varieties that I never liked in the past that really perform really well in Michigan. The difference between I had to pull out some Cornell data, because Cornell does some really cool agronomic measures on the different varieties, and those are in bold on the right hand side on the bottom. The winter survival for winter barley, pre-harvest sprout score, and Fusarium resistance index. So when I'm looking at barley agronomics, I'm not just concerned about yield. I'm concerned about it being able to yield that way year after year after year. So I'm also concerned about pre-harvest sprout, because even if it yields and I have pre-harvest sprout, it's worthless to me as a brewer. Oh, and I just wanted to say something about pre-harvest sprout. It's not worthless. That's really the wrong way to say it. You can buy pre-harvest sprouted barley and make malt out of it, as long as you don't store it for too long so that the pre-sprouted kernels die. You can make decent malt out of it. You've got to be careful with it, because it's going to be a little hot. It's going to be hotter than normal. So you want to hold back on the water. If you have a high pre-harvest sprout barley, the best thing to do is to pilot malt first before you decide what to do with it in production. But it can definitely be used. In sustainability, I think we really need to work on how can we use the entire crop, or as much of the crop as possible. Okay. So think about that. Fusarium resistance index is another one that I thought was important, but I think as a lot of people are noting, that with proper fungicide treatments, Fusarium is really not that big of issue anymore. Gosh, guys, if you can grow dawn-free barley in North Dakota, you can grow dawn-free barley in Michigan. Plain and simple. So anyway. I was showing you another weather pattern example. So all of the Cornell data, of course, is coming from New York, and I'm really interested in agronomic performance in Michigan. All right, so I have to make some inferences, and this is my inference, right? Michigan is drier around harvest, or I should say New York is wetter than Michigan around harvest. So to me, that infers that the disease resistance in Michigan is going to be better or equal to the disease resistance in New York. I don't know that to be true, but it makes sense to me. That's the only way I can use this data. Also, I know that it's warmer in Michigan in the winter. So I'm thinking the winter survival in Michigan is probably going to be less than or equal to the winter survival in New York. All right, so at least that gives me some idea of where I stand when I'm looking at this agronomic performance data out of Cornell. Whoop. Hey, I'm sorry, I gotta move you guys. Your picture's in the way. There we go. All right. So here's a ton of data. This is actually coming from Michigan State. And it's showing year after year after year of no, this is Cornell. This is showing 4 years of Cornell data for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different varieties of spring barley. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the difference from the crop year averages for each one of these performance indicators: mean yield, Fusarium head blight index, and pre-harvest sprout score. So for every year, then if you take the average of everything and then show the deviation of each variety against the average from year after year, you can see these patterns fall out. All right. If you look at Conlin is always yielding less than the average every single year. Okay. Tinka is up and down, so it looks like an average of about 0 or close to 0. And then Synergy is always yielding better than the average, and Newdale is up and down. Synergy is a good yielder, the highest yielding. I think it's still the highest yielding barley in Canada. It might not be anymore, but that makes sense. Same if you look at like North Dakota Genesis on Fusarium head blight index, you can see that Genesis is always got a higher head blight index than the average. You can see that Synergy always has a lower head blight index than the average. And I think Aaron said he doesn't like Synergy because he doesn't like Synergy because of pre-harvest sprout, I think. Anyway, same thing on the pre-harvest sprout score. You can actually see some patterns falling out. Okay. Basis this, what I'm showing for spring barley in the trials of the data from 215 to 218 out of Cornell, is that Tinka and Synergy gave us the highest ranking in agronomic performance. When I'm comparing varieties, I'm only doing ranking. I'm only comparing against each other. I'm not comparing against the standard. I'm really only interested in pulling out like the top, the top 10, top 20%. I know that we can't force a number. So all I can do is pick the best performer overall. And then there's a confidence level associated as well. That's how I took care of the missing data. So if there's only 3 years worth of data of one variety and 5 years worth of data on another variety, certainly the 5 years worth of data gives me more confidence in my conclusions than the 3 years of data. So that's kind of the confidence level that I'm throwing up there. And same agronomic performance by winter variety. At this point in time, TP was the best agronomic performer that had any data behind it, and this is where I first got a clue that I might want to look at TP. I had already been looking at all sorts of Michigan State data for quality, and TP was one of those that wasn't included, except for one big study, which it was, and that's where I decided it was worth a shot. But you can also see that on the very top, Calypso is a great performer. All right, Calypso is a great performer. San Mateo is a great performer. I was simply waiting for more data to support those conclusions. Right, those are only based on 1 or 2 years worth of planting. Calypso 1 year worth of planting. Anyway, later on, I think we'll see that Calypso does do very well compared to everything else, and San Mateo as well. And yeah, Calypso just does have a slight, I shouldn't say slight, does have an issue with dormancy, which can be can definitely it would take some work to use that. So it's up to the maltsters to decide if they want to deal with that or not. But depending on the kind of malt, if when Calypso shows that it's still #1 overall, depending on the kind of malt you want to make, if it's the #1 agronomic performer and it makes decent malt, it needs to be included in the variety list of what I'm growing. Michigan agronomic performance. Okay, so in Michigan, this is Michigan. This is Michigan State data now, And this is some of the older stuff. I haven't gotten through the last 2 years of data yet, but the ones that I've got highlighted well, it's supposed to be green. The varieties I got highlighted in green are ones that showed year after year that they weren't susceptible to pre-harvest sprout as measured by RVA. So if I'm trying to grow a sustainable crop, I don't want to have to deal with RVA. So I'm not even really I'm not considering those varieties. All right, I'm not even going to plant them because I'm going to have RVA issues that I can't predict. That leaves though many decent varieties, that don't have RVA issues, and Tinka is still in there, Odyssey's still in there, Genie's still in there. Odyssey is a really good variety because it's glycosidic nitrile free. So right off the bat, Odyssey could be a beautiful barley to use for distillers, to make the distillers happy. Anyway, that's anything in red, I don't recommend growing, just because of the RVA issues. You can decide to grow them and then handle the RVA issues by malting them as soon as it's off the field. But I don't want to have to deal with that. Then this is the winter barley management trial out of KWS is the first place that I actually saw TP barley quality out of Michigan, and it's also got Scala quality. This is a great study, guys. This was absolutely insanely good study. It shows all sorts of stuff. It even answers questions that the experiment wasn't designed for. First thing I wanted to point out, and this is pretty, I think now this is pretty obvious, and it needs to be stressed, is that when you add nitrogen, you will definitely increase the yield, but up to a point. And after that, your yield was going to go up slightly while your total protein goes way crazy. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's an optimum level of nitrogen addition in farming that'll give you a decent yield and a low protein. And the sweet spot seems to be something 75 plus pounds per acre. And of course, that's all going to depend on the soil type and all that. But this is where your supply chain can be different from old supply chains of the past. So what I'm used to is telling the farmer that you have a maximum specification for total protein, okay? And really that is normally around 13.5. And then the farmer goes off and does his thing, and then you get this, you get this huge range in total protein coming from your region. I think personally, to make this work with our barleys, I think we have to change that a little bit and give the farmer an incentive to shoot for low total protein and an incentive that makes up for his possible loss in yield of maybe up to, it looks like, if you look between 75 and 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre, the yield loss is about max 10%. So you have to be able to compensate the farmer for that. Just an observation. Total protein is incredibly important. I've said this before. A couple weeks back, there was a question on how low total protein can go. And then I was really surprised to hear the answer that you don't want to accept protein below 9.5%. And, I really don't know why. I can understand that there might be a problem. You might think that with the protein going down, your enzyme levels are going to go down, and your free amino nitrogen is going to go down, and you're not going to have any foam or anything. But if you use the data from this study, you can actually see that you can go down to 8% total protein and hardly affect the diastatic power or the free amino nitrogen, or even the alpha amylase. If you're if you have a spec of 9.5% protein and you reject an 8.5% protein, you're only losing what? You're only losing 5 units on diastatic power, which, by the way, probably will not be seen in a lab analysis. You're going to be losing what? 5-10 units of fan, and I don't know, five units max of alpha amylase. I guess what I'm trying to say is this is going to make these low protein barleys are going to make the best malt for base, the best base malt you'll ever see. They'll have plenty of enzyme. They'll have lower fan. It's going to just give you some high quality base malt. I do not see rejecting anything this low. I see using something this low to make the kind of product that it can make, you know, and that's my thing, is that each variety and at each quality is ideal for some kind of product. It's ideal for some kind of product. So it's my job to figure out what product that is and make it happen. Oh, the Maltsters Associated of Great Britain is showing that in Scotland, 92% of the distillers barley is under 9.5% total protein. 92% of the Scottish distillers barley is under that total protein. So distillers don't have any problem with low protein, and the distillers have to ferment it just like the brewers do. So that's just another argument that low total protein certainly shouldn't be rejected. And I'm just saying that because, gosh darn it, the farmers are growing this stuff. They come up with something wonderful or possibly wonderful, and then it gets rejected. And I don't know how we can have a sustainable supply chain if we can't figure out how to use decent quality barley, you know, that the farmers have given us. The farmers have to be super happy for this to work. Oh, I like using malt quality fingerprints. This is just for base malts. Base malt quality is a whole lot more complicated than specialty malt quality. You know, in caramel malts, you're really only worried about color and flavor, and but in base malts, you're worried about, you know, all the other things that go into to brewing. So the base malts basically make the stock, if you will, and the specialty malts are like the seasoning for that stock. Base malt, so you can make a really incredible stock or not so incredible stock, and then flavor it with specialties. This is for the stock. These are analyses that are important for making the stock. All right. If you don't need to worry too much about DP or fan if you're making caramel malt, because all you're doing is cooking it and bringing color out of it. Okay, so I'm showing you the normal crop quality variability. This is actually this top here is data showing you a single crop year of production from a very small area in the United States, and it's showing you the top one is showing you the protein range that you see when you use a spec max of 13.5% total protein. All right, this is what we've told the farmer. They have a spec max 13.5% total protein, and this is the range in protein you're going to get. It looks like 3-4% total protein. Each one of these varieties at 9% protein is going to make totally different malt than each one of these varieties at 13.5% protein. So how does big maltsters handle this? Well, they bring all these in. They start out knowing what the crop is, then they bring in the different protein levels, controlled manner, so they can blend them together and make everything one big monster blend. That's the idea. Smaller guys can't do that. Smaller guys don't have that. I don't think smaller guys have the ability to do that because they don't have all the inventory space. They don't have space to bring in 5 different proteins of a barley variety and then malt them and then blend them back together again. So I think what we need to do as smaller, newer industry is to try to get our protein results shifted to the left, to bring those down and drop that range down. And we have to come up, I think we have to come up with a way to do that. But the other thing I wanted to say is that, okay, so I'm looking for high protein and somebody's going to say, well, I'm looking for low protein. And somebody says, well, I think high protein is the highest quality. And so shouldn't I be growing for high protein? Well, you grow for low protein, you're going to get high protein. It's going to happen. You're going to see it and you're going to need to do something with it. So in my opinion, you grow for low total protein and then you use the high total protein that comes out as a result for the high protein materials. If you again, if you're gonna give a brewer any malt that's made with any variety of malt that's made with a 9% protein versus a 13.5% protein, he cannot make his beer out of that malt without making some serious adjustments to his process. And that isn't going to make him happy. He's not going to want to buy from you anymore if you are sending him that kind of variability. The two down below, the 2 graphs down below are actually showing you malt quality distributions from the exact same barley distribution up there. All right, and you can see, that sometimes you're getting 78% extract and sometimes you're getting 83. Brewer can't be very happy with that, getting a 78 extract or an 83 extract. This is all the same kind of malt, guys. This is all the same target. Same thing with diastatic power. You've got a range of 100 to 180. You aren't giving the brewer the same kind of malt. He cannot make the same kind of beer out of that without significant brewing adjustments. And that's this kind of stuff brewers don't want to deal with, is having to make brewing adjustments every shipment of malt. So to prevent that, then brewers have developed relationships with specific maltsters, and they've learned the specific maltsters and the varieties of the specific maltsters. And as long as that the specific maltsters are sending them the same varieties and the brewers are using those in the same blends, they don't have to make any adjustments because their quality is very consistent. Okay, so out of this, I found that TP looked really good, and to me it looks like Michigan's best bet for a lager pilsner quality winter barley. So I found some seed, and Michael bought it and got it planted, and in three different places. Now this is the same seed that we gave to Manny as well. It was a really crappy germinating seed, like 60% germination. When we planted it, we adjusted the seeding rate based on the germination, and we got averaged about 95 bushel an acre on that, which is a pretty good result of three different farms. And if you look at the analysis, the proteins are all exactly where I want them to be. And look at the plumps are all very high. This looks really good. This is, so far this is the best. This is the second best results I've had on a new variety in a new region. So yeah. Everything looks really good. Good stuff. I pilot malted just to see what it would do. I pilot malted these. One of the barleys, and I was trying to do some different stuff on the number 1 and number 2. The difference between 1 and 2 is number 2 was I was trying to make it an undergrown Pils malt that would be used by brewers who like decoction mashing. So if you listen to brewers talk about Synergy Select Pilsen, you will hear complaints that Synergy Select Pilsen does not stand up to decoction mashing. Well, I can totally understand that because it's so friable, it's going to fall apart, and it's going to just it's not going to be a really good bet for decoction mash. So I was trying to make something with some high fine coarse difference and some low friability that I could give to the decoction mashers to make them happy. And then the one on the right, which I totally screwed up, that was supposed to just demonstrate that I can get some color out of this. So I've heard a lot of I shouldn't say a lot. I've heard some talk from locals that TP is a bad variety. It doesn't malt very well, and it doesn't make color. So number 3 was kind of like my my first attempt to make some color out of TP. So the analysis the only try I've ever, very first results on this barley. The first time that I've malted Michigan TP. And here's what we got. And I can just tell you right off the bat, that the results are really, really, really good. Okay, the malt analysis, if you look at the malt analysis comparison, you can see that the plump off number 1 and 2, which are supposed to be Pilsen malts, the plump, which would be over to the right-hand side, you add the 7 and the 6/64, they're about 99%. That's pretty good plump. All right. The color is high on those 2 for Pilsen, but I baked it. We cooked the crap out of it to make good flavors. This is your high flavor Pilsen malt. It's really, for a first try, this is the second best results I've ever had on my first try with a new barley in a new area. The first, my best success, of course, was the Synergy Select. But we're on to something here, guys. You know, let's talk about number 1 and number 2. This stuff looks like standard brewer's malt. All right. So with winter barley out of Michigan, we can produce something that represents normal, average North American brewer's malt. I don't think that's a bad result. I think that's a very, very good result. And then if I do something crazy to it, like number 3, where I'm trying to get color, I got 6, over 6 color out of this stuff, and we still got some diastatic power and alpha amylase there going. Now I say I screwed this up because I wasn't shooting for a 6 color. I only wanted to get like a 3 or a 3.5, and I didn't want to make the friability go down. So obviously what happened is I have gelatinized some starch. You can see it in the partially unmodified grains and the whole unmodified grains as well. That I screwed this up because my brain fell asleep for 5 minutes during a critical time, and I only had 1 malt to do this with. So, but if you, well, let's just say number 1 and 2 look like really decent brewer's malt, maybe not world-class pills, but I still have spring barleys later to deal with the world-class pills. So if we look at my mistake though, number 3, I look at this analysis and I'm thinking, my God, this almost looks like Munich. You know, it certainly is dark VN or a light Munich, or this is also the kind of analysis you get from a world-class caramel malt. Now you'd have to take the starch gelatinization all the way to 100%, but that's no big deal. Anyway, right now with this variety, you can make a lot of different products. All right, a lot of different products, and they're all going to be pretty decent. So for me, this is really good results. Better results than I ever saw on the other side of the lake. All right, this gives me high hope that Michigan can be the source of some really, really good malting, brewing quality raw material. And then, yeah, and in the end, what I would do, what I would like to do is to take some varieties that are great agronomic performers and also produce barley that's huge plump and huge in extract and low in beta glucan, pick the varieties that have both high and low enzyme and fan levels. And that gives me basically a supply of raw material that can be used to make just about any kind of product that there is. And then if I can't make it from those extremes, I can blend the two together. On top of that, now we have to deal with, in the long term, we're going to have to deal with crop failures. And I like the fact that the Craft Maltsters Guild is using a 50% requirement for the barley supply, because that gives you the ability to supplement your local barley supply with something that's outside of the area that will be available in case you have a local crop failure. So you're looking at possibly Canada as a supply of certain varieties, or you're looking at the Western United States as a possible supply of certain varieties. But I have never ever produced until this time, I've never produced a winter barley above 80% extract. And this one came out at 81.7. So it looks better than the German Pilsen, the world-class German Pilsen. And that's winter barley out of Michigan. So I've blabbed enough.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vince. Before I forget to comment on it, so the slide with the 4 figures that showed total protein on the x-axis and then the products of protein modification on the y-axis, it was really interesting to me that there was such distinct separation between genotypes, and particularly in puffin, that on the alpha amylase figure, there was actually negative correlation with.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
It's weird.
What do you think that means? Hey, hang on, let me get there.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. That was something that, where is that? Okay, let's share.
Yeah, there was enough data points that
you
it's
can see this, right?
all I can see is the top bar of your PowerPoint. It's not.
Okay, hang on.
But yeah, there's enough data points to where it's not just some weird anomaly. Yeah,
No.
it is.
Right. Isn't that something?
Yeah, the lower left figure, so weird.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Oh, and I also wanted to say, you know, who owns Scala?
KWS, I believe.
Well, it's looking to me like Scala and TP are the same variety. Just saying. Is it possible?
Well, TP Syngenta, Scala's KWS.
Yeah. Well, they're very similar. They are very similar.
And if you look at all versus total protein is quite different there.
Yeah, well, that's the only difference is the fan level. Yeah, but okay. So and about fan is, if you look at my my whole analysis together, right? If you look at the whole analysis, you'll see that I've basically over modified the 2 Pilsen malts on the TP. As I reduce that modification level, the fan is going to come down. So I have maltster control there on bringing the fan down on that TP, because I still have low beta glucan, and I have S over T is near 50%. So I have room to move the fan down a bit. And then that's also going to drop my color formation potential. So I will be able to get the color down on that as well. I was a little surprised at the high colors, because I had heard that TP didn't color. Anyway.
Yeah, Tom's saying they frequently get or consistently exceed 80% extract with Scala.
Oh no, Scala is I agree. Scala looks pretty good. Scala ranked, like I said, it ranked right next to TP on almost everything.
Yeah, so Seedway had the distribution and licensing rights to TP, Scala, Wint Malt, a lot of these winter lines, and I think because of choices they made in distribution, they kind of limited how much we've been able to use them in trials and put them out in the field here. But from what I heard from growers in the past few years, Scala was a good performer economically here. A lot of folks liked it better than wit malt. And the one grower I worked with that did a field trial with TP really liked it as well. But if it's hard to get seed, then it's hard to really deploy it in a widespread, meaningful manner too.
Well, again, if you look at the data out of that beautiful study out of KWS, the Scala is just about everybody as good as the TP.
Hey, Vince.
Yeah.
What else can we do? So we've got TP planted at the station this year, and I was planning to do a fungicide trial like we've been doing, learning some more agronomic details, but are there things that you're interested in trying out, manipulating, specifically focused on the quality end of things to see if we might see some advances or challenges?
Really, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, but I will think about it. I think you already nailed it. Quite frankly, it looked to me like you already nailed it.
Can you show that slide one more time that you just had up?
Oh, yeah, sure. That one?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have these data too, because
No, yeah, this is your data.
I produced them, yes, but I did not do these types of cross analyses. So,
Well, that's why I like this study so much, is because I can go back and look at it with different questions, and I can answer those different questions, that ones that you weren't even trying to answer. You can answer so many questions already. This is so cool.
Kelvin and Manny, I think, did the nitrogen phosphorus study, which I'd certainly, the reason I was willing to put the money down on the TP was maintaining. There seemed to be a max out on the protein, but I would like to see how low you could go and unless the data that we already have suggests that. Nice to be able to see where the lower limits are on the nitrogen impacting yield, which I know we have that, but again, that was the reward, the reward to the producer for lower proteins includes not having to buy so much or apply so much nitrogen. So
yeah,
I think that was good. I didn't know if we had anything specific we were doing with straw, with the TP straw, just to see if there were any other things that was going to be planting date, which we have planting date, we have planting rate, and then we also have the precision planting versus traditional, which I think also will be really valuable, either to prove out that those precision elements. So one of the fields was planted with the Horst precision planter by Dennis.
Yeah. And
it was a nice high in a previously in a wheat field, so it was a nice high yield. But again, is that why it yielded 1.5 bushel per acre more?
Okay. Well, I'll keep thinking and maybe come up with something creative too. If nothing else, we'll have another site to compare against some other varieties again. And
definitely, you can't get too much. Every year you learn something, right?
Yeah.
Every year you learn something, and it just depends on how much risk you want to take on what you're going to try. I'm sorry, commercially. Academically, you can try anything you want.
Right.
So yeah, Larry was commenting. Larry's from Mitten State Malt, and his malt house is in Okemos, and I believe his barley fields are not too far away, so middle of the Lower Peninsula, Lansing-ish. Looks like he's unmuted. But yeah, he said poor winter survival in 2018 and 2019. I want to know about snow cover. Tom wants to know about polar vortex. So Larry, can you give us some insight?
Yeah, had snow cover in 18, 19, I think was not as much. They were different fields, but not far apart. Just south of Eaton Rapids is where the fields were. The first year, the back half of the field totally died, but the front half established well. We didn't do anything with it. It looked good. Had very high DON though, but we didn't fungicide it. Used that for seed the next year on a different field, kind of both years, maybe a little late getting it planted. So it was, it was up well, but not, I would call it not well established. And then that next year, I think we did lack snow cover in 19 and had just throughout the whole field had very poor winter survival. Again, didn't do anything with it. Probably should have ripped it up, but kept it going for an experiment. And yeah, didn't do much, had high DON, had high ergot, just not usable. So those two, kind of got me to give up on Scala in Michigan and go to Calypso. But now this fall, I think I'm probably going to try Violetta for a winter.
So where is your farm in the state? Compared to like Hillman, and what are the big places that the MSU data comes from? Hillman and Chatham, right? And KWS, right? Where are you in relation to any of those nurseries?
Yeah, so it'd be more play on a par with KBS. A little bit north of there and a fair bit east. It's just straight. That farm is just the Scala was at just straight south of Eaton Rapids, about 10 miles. From Lansing would be about 20 miles to the southwest, just slightly west, mostly about 20 miles south of Lansing.
All right, I was just thinking though that because the MSU data does have it separated by nursery, right? By area, by location. There is an opportunity to match location with variety. I don't know what Scala did in that area. Was it Scala you were talking about, or TP, or?
Yeah, I tried Scala for 2 years because at Hickory Corners, I think Scala looked pretty decent. And this just a little bit north of that, but not a lot of latitude north.
Scala has been the one that I've noticed hasn't always performed superb. It never dies, but it sometimes, if with a tough winter, it hasn't done as great coming out of winter.
Yeah, KBS is quite a ways west of where Larry's fields are too. Do you think there's some kind of buffering due to Lake Michigan, even though you're a bit inland? Yeah,
Possibly.
You look at the results by nursery, and it's amazing to me the difference in performance just across the state. So there's obviously many microclimates. So Michigan isn't just one microclimate, right? It's probably 5 or 10.
Lots.
Well, the winter survivability data seems to be planting date and well-drained soils, not polar vortex.
Yeah, well established before winter, I think, is a key for sure, no matter what area. But yeah, Vince is right. We've probably got, if you throw the UP in there, we've probably got 4 or 5 different microclimates in Michigan. So, my goal is eventually to grow barley every year in pretty much every climate. And you're bound to have some good in some of those climates and probably some bad. But yeah, we've got a lot. It's good and bad that we have all those climates.
The planting date, is really going to come. That we've seen that there's the MSU planting date study. We don't have all the data yet back because that's in the ground right now. But I think that's going to come back on winter survivability, not within single varieties. And obviously there's issues around yield if you go too early. And then it was again 2 in-person field days ago where the winter survivability was the respiration of the plant. And I've had this witness where you have those that less drained section over there, that very well drained upland over there, and it's just a clear delineation between frozen in ice and dry in the winter. And that was what the data suggests for winter survivability.
I would like to, it seems like we've tapped our resources for the spring barley varieties, but I'm not sure that we've fully tapped the European resources for the winter barleys. You know, a number of the companies like Syngenta have quite a few varieties that they are now promoting in Europe, and they've kind of cast off TP, right? Like, this is our old hat. And yet we're finding that even that's turning out to be a good looking variety for us. So I just wonder what's, you know, over in Europe that we don't really have access to, or we haven't talked to the right person that we might be able to keep trying and digging into the pool that's already out there.
Looks like Mr. Aaron McLeod is back. So we were talking earlier about ranges of protein and what may or may not be desirable in raw barley. And Vince presented a very good case that the lower threshold isn't necessarily set in stone, and that, you know, it depends on genotype, how you're malting it, what your goals are, all that. And then Tom presented a question about like what's being put forth from your institution, from your lab, and also in the Craft Maltsters Guild. When I was at Pilot, anything below 12% was fair game for us, but that's capped much higher from what Vince presented. And then how protein is allocated, it depends on genotype too. We saw this weird negative correlation with puffin to total protein and alpha amylase, which is interesting. So what are your thoughts on like where you want to be for certain goals in protein?
I think it's a great question. And I think it's great to remind ourselves that there's no hard either bottom, lower limit or cap, right? I was actually just reviewing the Chinese specs for Canadian barley for this year, and they actually want it above 12, right? So that's because they want those enzymes that Vince had showed in the high Metcalfe, Kendall. They want that. I remember when some South American delegates from South American brewing companies came to Winnipeg to the Grain Commission, and we started talking about, we were enthusiastically talking about lowering the protein content, like Synergy is a lower protein content, and they got really annoyed really quickly. What do you mean Canada's lowering the protein of the grain, right? So it absolutely depends on what your goals are. So for instance, adjunct brewing, adjunct distilling, high protein the better, right? And so this is where we're seeing in the Southeast actually a problem the other way, right? They're growing winter two-row barley that tends to be under 12%, and they can't get the enzymes for like a distilling malt that easily, like the DP especially. But if you want to favor extract, the lower the better. We're looking at very soft wheats right now with 7 and 8% protein that are just all extract, right? But I think Vince might have a more sort of personal knowledge with this, but I find if you get too low on barley protein, so below 9, the limiting factor becomes the ability to synthesize enzymes. So there's just not as much building blocks to get that alpha amylase and DP up where you might want them to be. And we could potentially argue about how much is enough, right? There's lots of malts that you can buy from companies that Vince highlighted as producing world-class malt that routinely have 75 DP and 40 alpha, but our North American craft brewers who would purport to want lower enzymes are not used to brewing that way. And so what I have found is that when we start to approach that level of dissect power, then the brewers get caught off guard and complain because their conversions are not fast and their attenuation is not what they wanted, and et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't mean those you couldn't brew very successfully, I think, with those, but they are not used to it because they were essentially weaned and trained on raw Turo. Raw Turo, I call it's like the ubiquitous craft malt, right? It's just BSG, just shovels it out, by the truckload, bag, and super sack, and it's like 130 DP and 70 alpha, 65 alpha. So that's what they're used to. So I just think I worry about the lower end. There's no clear line, but you really have to really know and be sure about what your goals are in the malt house. So you can go low on the protein and you can potentially get big extract returns, but enzyme synthesis becomes a limiting factor if it gets too low. And there's certainly a genotype interaction. So you can grow two varieties side by side with the same amount of nitrogen, same weather, and you can certainly get different protein. So yeah, some varieties are certainly predisposed to lower, predisposed to higher.
Any thoughts on the negative correlation between alpha amylase and total protein in puffin?
So the higher the protein in puffin, the lower the alpha amylase. Yeah, because it's chronically undermodified. So when the protein goes up, and Vince maybe would agree or disagree, but my experience, when the protein goes up, so this would be like puffin can get high protein, conlin can get high protein. Water uptake is slower, and they just don't hydrate sufficiently unless you're really adapting to get the water in. And that water is a huge driver of modification, and alpha amylase is directly linked with modification. So it's really it's one of those inverse correlations it's not that the high protein caused it. It's that it did not modify well, or whoever was malting it didn't work hard enough to modify it properly.
Exactly. Whoever malted it didn't take into account the water uptake difference.
Yeah.
Look, when you're making a malt, the steep recipe is decided by the barley. It's not decided by the maltster. The barley decides the steep recipe. There was a really nice paper published at Montana State about steep recipes, and I'm telling you what, guys, if you use their optimal steep recipe for Michigan barley, you are going to get crap. I swear to God. The Michigan brewers have to be able to deal with dormancy and water sensitivity, and some of it's bad enough that the barley is going to have to be stored for 6 months before you can malt it.
We already see that with the Calypso. Calypso's dormancy does not really allow it to be malted successfully before Christmas, right? And so we're really encouraging people to store it, and they have to plan accordingly. Violetta is a bit more intermediate, but it still seems to benefit. The best Violetta results we're getting are now, like after almost a year of storage. It's malting really great in Ohio, the Violetta right now. But in October, November, December, January, these guys were really struggling to push. It's funny, Vince, right? Like germination vigor, it's not something you can push on that easily in the malt house, because any of the levers that you try to use to push it always end up with something bad happening.
It's all timing. It is all timing, and it's all based on the barley's response. It's not based on your 12-hour or 16-hour or 20-hour recipe. If you're making malt for the first time, you have to watch it. You have to look at it every couple of hours, and as soon as it's ready, you do it. Then you make the recipe based on that. That's how you optimize your malt quality.
Full pint would have been the same way, Brian. It was chronically high protein, chronically high beta glucan. And
horribly so when high beta glucan, horribly.
So to malt it, you'd have to hydrate it like 48% steep up moisture, 50% steep up moisture. And then it's all overgrown and the S over T is off. So this is what we call a chronically unbalanced variety. Exactly. And the sort of I felt like the take home message there is that Pat was trying to do something good, right? Mm-hmm. He was trying to bring to market something that the brewers wanted, but he sidestepped a critical piece, which is to say, well, even if you like the flavor, if it can't be malted successfully, it's moot. So what Pat needed to do, which he has now done, is it's all about in plant breeding, the funnel. You've got all this stuff here, and the plant breeder first throws away all the garbage that doesn't grow well, because that's what they measure first, and they're good at that. And then he went right to flavor, and he skipped evaluating, well, does it malt well, right? So now he's got a more proper decision tree in his funnel. He throws out everything that doesn't grow well, then he throws out everything that doesn't malt well, and then you go and say, well, what tastes the best, right? If it tastes great but doesn't malt, useless. And so it has sort of become a useless thing. And I actually would argue that the breeders are irresponsible to go directly to the brewers. That was an irresponsible thing for him to do. I know that's sort of over dramatizing it, but you don't go to the brewer and cut the maltster out of the loop. He took these candidates, 6 experimental barleys, and said to the brewers, which one do you like? Well, the maltster has a key role here, right? It's the same thing happened. Chris Swersey did it. The same thing. There was a variety called Dash. What was that one, Vince? Briess worked on that too. Dash 63 or something from Gongshu's program in Idaho. And Chris Swersey started going around telling a bunch of brewers that it tasted great. And then the brewers
I know.
the brewers went to the malt houses and said, we want Dash 63. And the maltsters were like, no, it's crap. We can't malt this.
Crap.
So that was another one where these guys have to stay out of it and let the maltsters do due diligence and bring things forward. I just don't think we can skip them in that. And AMBA would never do something like that, right? AMBA is really a malting. AMBA is a maltster organization. So that's my little speech there about plant breeding, the funnel, decisions have to come in certain order, and who should be involved in that.
All right, so sum up and call back. The weirdness with Puffin was trying to force the square peg of a problematic barley into a round hole of a one-size-fits-all micro-malting regime.
Yes, that's right.
When it needed to be finessed.
Yes.
I also, one comment, so when we would malt high protein water sensitive Conlin, regularly would we do 60-hour steeps. So 60 hours front to back, including long air rests. Yeah. So, 2 long immersions, 1 short immersion, long air rests in between. So definitely flexing that, because
I learned from Vince how to malt water sensitive barley. Can be done with the knowledge. He was very generous in sharing that.
It's the norm more than not here in Michigan too, water sensitivity. But on to a new question, and maybe controversial one. So is gibberellic acid, a sinful thing to use in the face of dormancy? The moral question.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
So here's my problem with Jib is that when it was being used a lot, it was being used for everything. And it makes I think it makes very unbalanced malt.
When used irresponsibly.
Yeah.
So I think that's where
I've also found that if you cannot get the barley to germinate, Jib has very little effect. All right, the barley has to germinate.
It has to be able to germinate. So it has to have high germinative capacity.
It has to have high germinative capacity.
If the vigor is low, which it is for Flavia, Violetta, and Calypso, and frankly, even after a year of storage, right? If we looked at the vigor, which has like the 24-hour germination, so we talk about the energy, that's the 3-day germination, 4 mil. After 24 hours, I call that the vigor. Something like Synergy, right off the combine, 80 on the first day, right? And then another 20, you got 100. But something like Calypso, 20 on the first day. And maybe even by January, February, or March, it's only 30 or 40 on the first day. This is low vigor barley. Gibberellic acid is extremely valuable at the right proportion dose to just give it a little bit more vigor so that you end up with the same amount of malting it in the same amount of time, right? So it might be like 7 or 8 day total, 8 or 9 day total malt. But within that 8 or 9 total days, instead of getting like a 35 alpha, you'll get a 50 alpha. So it just gives it that little bit of energy so that you can do it. I think that's the most responsible way to use gibberellic acid. I think that some of these European varieties were essentially designed to be used with it, especially like 6-row winters. In France, they're using it all the time. So that tells me there's nothing wrong with this. French are making more malt than almost anyone else in the world, right? So the problem in North America is that it has gotten, like what Vince said, a bad reputation because people would try to use it for low germination capacity barley. They would try to use it to shorten. They would try to use it to shorten the malting time, but it doesn't really have a lot of action on beta glucan degradation. So if you try to abuse it, I think you get in trouble. But if you use it responsibly, and I think like Violetta, you should almost always be using it.
Yeah, the combination of super high FAN and super high beta glucan right there shows me that you're using Jib responsibly.
Yes, it pushes up the color. But these ones need it.
Crazy. My personal opinion is I've always thought for me, it's a personal challenge to be able to make decent malt out of any barley without using jib. So it's always been my like personal drive to not use jib ever. But I have used jib because I've had to, period. You know, when you get a crop year failure, meaning all of a sudden your barley is super dormant and you still got to make malt because you got to sell to brewers who have to make beer, then you need jib to make that happen. But it's not an ideal situation. You never get ideal malt out of it, but you can get through some tough times. There's no doubt.
I think that's a very North American perspective, Vince. I work with maltsters in the Southeast who use it and get ideal malt because those barleys need it. Violetta needs it to get ideal malt, I would almost say, in 8 days. I
disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay.
If it germinates, I think I can do a pretty good job without the jib.
All right. That's a challenge.
And I give it a try anytime. And if it doesn't work, then jib to me is just the last resort. That's all.
Gotcha.
It's just the last resort. And I need to make sure that my customer is good with it because I don't like the fact that I'm adding additives. I'm adding a compound that's being produced by microbes, genetically engineered microbes to produce this chemical.
Is that what it is? Is that what it is? It's a synthetic product.
Yeah, it's microbial fermentation.
Okay.
It's a mold actually that produces it.
No, we had to use it in the greenhouse for dwarf, to produce dwarfism in the potted plants. So again, but again, it was everybody's bad day when you have to add that. Thanks for bringing it up.
Well, jib is obviously jib is being used for making malt out of hard red spring wheat. I have no doubt that that's a normal thing right now. That's North American hard red spring wheat. I think malt is jibbed. Jibbed, all of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was wondering about that. Fungally derived.
And the reason I like the Michigan soft red wheats is because they make an analysis similar to the hard red spring wheat without the jib. So what I'm saying is that I can malt the soft red winter wheat out of Michigan and get an analysis similar to the hard red spring wheat with jib.
Only you, Vince, though. I've never seen wheat friabilities as high as when you make the malt.
That's
That's your secret sauce.
Thank you. That's a pat on the back. I like.
I mean,
that.
You sang plenty of
Aaron, that's big, man. That's big from you, man.
You sang plenty of your own praises earlier, but I'll sing you that one.
Thank you.
So let me get this straight. Jib is a byproduct of microorganisms, unlike beer.
Well, do you drink milk with hormone added to it? Is that okay with you that you're drinking milk that's had bovine hormone added?
Actually, it is okay with me because it's naturally produced in cows.
But for some people, it's not okay. There's a huge movement against it.
You're asking the wrong guy.
There's a huge movement against it. So if I'm trying to make everybody happy, I got to learn how to get by.
Well, gibberellin's naturally produced in plants as well. It's just augmenting and offsetting the ratio of those hormones to get it to perform the way you want. So similar to the situation with hormones in milk, right? Although Dean drinks Mouville, so I don't believe there's any added hormones there.
I've also heard that, and I don't know this to be true, but I've been told that jib use needs to be stated on the label. Does anybody know the answer to that?
There's no laws, you know that, Vince. There's only one federal regulation when it comes to malt. It's NDMA. There's no other regulations on the books.
Yeah, even the DON content for wheat is an FDA guideline or a recommendation. It's not even codified.
It's an advisory level for human consumption on raw wheat.
Yeah, raw wheat.
But it's really a brewer perception thing. The brewers are really demanding it. I mean, that's 0.5 parts DON is nothing. There is nothing wrong with it at all. It's just the idea that there's this chemical that makes pigs vomit that's in your mouth. That's all it is. It's just a concept that you have dirty malt.
Oh, let's be careful. Let's be more precise, Vince. The Dawn is used as a proxy measurement for Fusarium contamination, and we know that Fusarium is implicated in gushing, and so we do have to be careful. And
But
since
not at 1 part per million in the barley, not at 2 parts per million in the barley. I know this. Not at 1 part per million in the barley. And it's not the Dawn level, it's the freaking activity of the Fusarium when you bring the barley in and malt it. It has nothing to do with the Dawn level of the barley.
That's right. But if you have Dawn, then you know there's Fusarium, and so you have to really think about what you're going to do.
But if you have high Dawn and no Fusarium activity, you can eliminate the Dawn in steeping, and it doesn't come back in malting.
How will you know if there's the Fusarium activity? How will you gauge or measure that? In pilot malting?
Yeah, in pilot malting. But it's not something to do. There's no need for it. There's no need to play that game. No, I mean, I like a 0.5 part max spec. I think that's what everybody should be taking, is a 0.5 part max spec up to 1, you know, when there's a crop issue. But it's up to the brewers. If the brewers don't want it, you can't force them to take it.
Passionate points.
Yeah, there's a comment. If you start typing gibberellic into the search bar on goldbio.com, it'll bring up the product link. It obviously doesn't like people zooming right into that.
Sorry about the link, folks. It normally works in an email, but yeah, just go to goldbio.com and look for their product GA3 Quick Dissolve. It's just some people were going to like Sigma Aldrich and trying to buy it like in a pure, it's ridiculously expensive. This is a commercial, they sell it at commercial quantity. So it's like $1 for like, if you buy enough of it, it's like $1 per gram or something.
Yeah, which is a lot of GA if you're adding it to your malt. That is
because you're adding it in the parts per million range. So
okay, no need to type that in the chat now. Awesome. So any other questions for Vince? Any other hot button questions about additives, hormones? I don't know. No. We could just run qPCR on all of our malt and detect Fusarium that way. Does that sound efficient?
Yeah, but it's not quantitative. That's the problem with PCR. It tells you that it's there, but it doesn't tell you how much.
Real-time qPCR, actually.
No, real time? No, because it just amplifies it.
Right.
If you even have theoretically, if you have one bit of the DNA that matches your target, it'll turn it into 1 billion.
Right.
Well, if you quantify it in each PCR cycle and log that, you can infer what was originally present by the amount of times it actually replicates.
Okay.
So,
but you would need standards then. You would need some kind of standards to calibrate it.
You need a large grant to actually fund all this work to make it make sense.
Right, and I think your future is mapped out here. You got to do it.
I'll talk to Marty about that.
Yeah. So one thing that we tried at the Grain Commission was ergostrol. So ergostrol is a metabolite of the fungus. And so it's there you can quantify it. And it's a little bit, and since it's a part of the fungus, it's not like the Dawn, which is sort of not well correlated with fungal biomass. Has a better correlation with fungal biomass. But again, it's like, so what if I told you that the ergostrol was 60? Right? Well, then what would you do, right? These measurements are no good unless we were able to put them in context with performance and risk. As someone who make their living from measuring things, someone's always trying to call me to say, okay, I've got this problem. What can you measure? And I'm like, sometimes nothing. Or if I did measure it, we wouldn't know what to do with that number. So that's where we're at with this Fusarium. We would love to be able to quantify this and say, okay, at this level of X, we're going to have gushing, and below that, we're not. And today, we don't have that number. It's not Dawn. We know that. We don't know what it is. Like they're measuring hydrophobins in Europe because this is the actual compound that's implicated in gushing, but there's no limit established. Yeah, it's a problem. I've been telling people, grow clean barley, right? This isn't really about measurement and mitigation as much as about prevention. Do everything you can do. Choose a resistant variety. Make sure you have a robust rotation strategy. Spray the fungicides, use them appropriately. You gotta do everything.
Yeah, Paul Schwartz was talking about there seems to be some sort of connection between high wheat beers. So if you start to approach a certain quantity of wheat used in your mash, the proteins that get transferred through from wheat somehow are correlated to increased gushing. So an all malt barley beer isn't necessarily going to gush the same way or the same amount as a wheat beer with the same amount of hydrophobic proteins, hydrophobins in there. But yeah, you're right. It's hydrophobin. So that's what actually causes the enables the nucleation of CO2 to cause the gushing. Yeah. It's like the laser etching on the bottom of a pint glass, the same effect in essence. Question from Tom about dosing of GA, which is like a little beyond the pale, but there is literature out there. So Jeff Palmer in the UK did a lot of pioneering work on the use of gibberellic acid and also abrasion. So that stuff's, I'm sure, public domain by now. He was doing that research in the 60s. So when I was looking at the application of it, that was what I referred to. There's a lot of stuff in Briggs about it. So there's definitely a point of diminishing return with GA. So it's very potent, use a very small amount, but there's a lot of figures and tables out there that can guide you. But I'd recommend anyone that's interested in it to do their own research and use that to guide them. But Jeff Palmer, GEOFF, like the old Toys R Us mascot, Jeffrey. Palmer, just like it sounds, he's actually a very interesting figure. So I would suggest reading up on him and his life. He's pretty cool. Aside from just malting. So if there's no other questions for Vince, I should probably get back out to landscaping. Thanks everybody for an enjoyable session. We'll be on hiatus for a little while, but looking forward to firing up the old happy hours again, and we'll see you all very soon. Thanks for being here, and cheers.
Thanks, Ryan.